Good evening, everyone. We are here tonight for the 8th event of our project called Searching for a Cosmopolitan City in a Building, supported by CultureCIVIC. My name is Liana Kuyumcuyan, and for over a year, we have been working with Murat Tülek on this research project. We have been arranging a series of seminars as a part of it. And in March, we'll be publishing a book as an outcome of this research, which is focusing on the history of this building, which we are currently at right now, the old British Post Office. And it's currently called Postane. This building was built in 1859 to serve Britain as its postal office, and it was used for this purpose until 1895. And afterwards, it was used as a British boys' school, an apartment, a carpentry, a glass workshop, and finally a film house. And since 2021, it has been working as a social hub that aims to host social, environmental, and urban impact-oriented studies and cultural production. So as a part of these series of seminars, we were aiming to classify the concepts of this archive research that we have been doing and open these study themes to public discussion. And in our previous events, we talked mainly about the history of Galata and its changes through the years. We are doing one and only event in English tonight. That's why I wanted to give a small overview of our project, but for the Turkish speakers, they can find the previous seminars in the YouTube channel. And our next seminar will be about the Austrian high school and being a student in Galata on next Monday, but it will be held in Turkish. So today, Alexios Papadopoulos will be talking about the British Post Office in Istanbul, Constantinople, by focusing on the years 1857 until 1914. And to introduce Alexios, he's a postal historian based in Thessaloniki. He started collecting stamps when he was young, and later he studied postal history and its challenges during his bachelor studies. His focus is on postal system and written communication. He's interested in the postal history of the Balkans, especially the foreign post offices in the Ottoman Empire, and he's mainly focused on the British Post Office. He's a member of various philatelic societies in Greece and Great Britain, and has written articles for various philatelic publications. And he's also an accredited juror in the Federation of European Philatelic Associations in the Postal History class. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And if you will have any question, we will be taking them after the presentation because we need to give you this microphone. And if there will be any questions from YouTube, we will be reading it at the end. So thank you. Alexios, thank you for joining tonight. Hello.
Hello. Hello, everybody. It's really nice to be able to speak about the postal history aspect of the British Post Office in Istanbul. Thank you all for being here, and especially I would like to thank Murat and Liana for inviting me to this event and for making this happen. And it is quite nice to know that a large number of the items that you're going to see here today have actually been physically posted in the building where Postane is staged. And virtually every cover, every letter that I will show that was posted between 1859 and 1895 was posted on the actual Postane building. So it's quite special. Now, what will I talk about? I will talk about the postal history of the British Post Office in Istanbul, in Constantinople, from 1857, when it was established, until 1914, when it was closed due to the First World War and the end of the capitulations in the Ottoman Empire. Now, what is postal history? Postal history is a branch of philately that focuses on the study and collecting of letters. It shows how the mail traveled through the postal system, and we will see why specific stamps, postmarks, and additional markings were applied on the mail. So what can you see here today? You can see letters, covers, postcards, various postal stationery items, which traveled through the post, and they were posted at the British Post Office in Constantinople. Now, I realize that for most people, this is quite specialized or even unusual. So I will try to keep the specific knowledge up to a minimum. I don't want to get into any boring specialized details and will not go into much depth on postal rates or the various routes that were used. My purpose is to give you a glimpse of Constantinople's glorious multinational heritage through some beautiful posted letters. We have to remember that Constantinople was the capital of the Ottoman Empire, a cosmopolitan place, and the first-class commercial city. There existed a number of foreign post offices. There were French post offices, Austrian, Egyptian, Russian, Italian, Greek, German, even Romanian operating there in the Ottoman Empire, and especially in Constantinople. So, this is actually part of my postal history exhibit on the British postal system in the Ottoman Empire, and it covers only the Constantinople post office and the Istanbul sub-post office. It was a much smaller post office, a sub-post office, which had the main post office in Constantinople as the capital post office. The historical background was that Great Britain was among the powers that operated their own postal offices on sovereign Turkish territory in the 19th century. This anomaly of national post offices operating in the Ottoman Empire was due to the so-called capitulations. So the British opened post offices in Constantinople in 1857, in Smyrna or Izmir in 1872, in Beirut in 1873, in Istanbul, the sub-office in 1885, and in Selanik, Thessaloniki in 1900. Now, before the establishment of the British Post Office there, the early mail to Great Britain was regularly sent by French steamboats via Marseille or by British packets, British steamboats via Malta, or the Austrian Postal Land Service via Semlino or Zemun as it's called today in Vienna. Mail of importance, however, was carried in the diplomatic bag of the Constantinople embassy and carried outside the mainstream mails. The top cover here, it's a letter that was actually written in Smyrna, in Izmir, in February 1843 at the British consulate. It was it went through the Constantinople embassy, the British the British embassy in Constantinople, and it was addressed to London, where the diplomatic bag was opened and the letters went through the mail system to be delivered. As you can see, it is franked. Franked means that it bears a stamp, a postage stamp, of 1 penny red, a British stamp, which might have been put by the sender in Izmir or in transit in Constantinople, or which is more likely on arrival in London. According to my knowledge, to all the records that I have, this is the earliest recorded letter from Turkey bearing a postage stamp. Now, the Crimean War was a very important event. A British Army post office was established in Constantinople in June 1854 to cater for the needs of the British men serving there. And Edward Smith was appointed as the army postmaster. He was sent from the General Post Office in London to Constantinople to organize this army post office and to become the first postmaster. Here we have a letter at the bottom sent by a certain Captain Frere, who was serving on a British warship in the Black Sea Fleet. It is addressed to his wife in July 1854, where he mentions that yesterday I had a note from a brother of my old shipmate Smith. He has been sent out here to Constantinople as postmaster and has come up here, I fancy, to hear in what kind of order the post office is in. Edward Smith remained in Constantinople after the closure of the army post office, and he was the one that organized the civilian post office, which opened on the 1st of July, 1857. This was, the Constantinople office was by far the largest British post office in the Levant. It was the major city, and the amount of volume of business that it generated was exceeding 50% of all other British post offices coming together. As I said, it was opened in July 1857. 3 letters are known from the first month of operation of the office. All these 3 are incoming mail, that is, they were coming to Constantinople. And this cover was sent from London on the 16th of July, 1857, and reached Constantinople 2 weeks later. You can see here, if it is clear in your screens, the postmark here reads British Post Office, Constantinople, paid July 30th, 1857. Now, an important year is 1875. Why is 1875 such an important year? Because that was the year that the General Postal Union was created. Countries came together to an agreement and said that, okay, from now on, we will impose the same postal rates without taking notice of what the route actually is. Before 1875, before the General Postal Union, each letter was charged accordingly to which route it took to get to the destination. So the situation is very complex. The postal rates are very complex and always depended on the route taken. For this complex period up to 1875, we will see some examples of different routes and different rates from the British Post Office in Istanbul. The top cover, both of these covers went by French packet to Marseille and from there to Great Britain. That is, there was a French steamboat, took the British mail along with the French one to Marseille, and from there it went to Great Britain. The upper cover is actually an entire letter which is registered. Registered mail in this early period is really difficult to find. And you can see here that the stamps used were British, ordinary British stamps without any surcharge or overprint. So we have British stamps, and they're specifically produced for Constantinople, barred oval obliterator with the C, the capital C, of Constantinople. Quite clear postmarks as well. The second example is not registered, but it's a rather nice cover again to Great Britain, sent in 1872. The same route again applied here, but this is incoming to Constantinople mail. The first one is marked insufficiently prepaid because the sender in Manchester paid only for a quarter of an ounce letter, but this letter was found to be half an ounce in weight. So the recipient, Peter Zechner in Constantinople, had to pay 1 shilling to receive the letter. The bottom letter sent from London to Galata to a certain Mr. Thalasso you can see that has this not called for on it, the red straight light marking. What happened? This was sent in July 7, 1969. Attempts were made for this to be delivered to the man, but he didn't even go to the post office to collect it. So after about 6 or more months, it was returned back to London with this marking not called for, to explain why it was returned. Another route to Great Britain was the so-called quick route via France. Quick route because it was quicker than by ship to Marseille and from there to Great Britain. And as such, it was more expensive. This was normally used from Istanbul from May 1867. Even this route, after the Franco-Prussian War, this was replaced by the Belgian route because during the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, it was very difficult to get through the war areas, so it had to be changed again via Belgium. This is the example of a quick route via France. The route via Belgium can be seen here. 2 covers, both they were sent by way of Belgium, and this had a particularity. It was used from July 1870. During the summer, the usual route was by Austrian boat to Varna, but in the winter months, a less weather-dependent route was adopted, and that was by Austrian packets to Trieste. Now, the first cover here is sent in February, a winter month, so it took the winter route by Austrian packet to Trieste and from there to Belgium. The second cover, which was sent in August, my summer month, it should have taken, as we saw, the summer route. But instead of that, it was sent via Trieste because in the summer of 1873, when it was sent, a cholera epidemic broke out in the Danube, making it necessary for the mails to be diverted from the contaminated area. This practice started on the 7th of August and lasted for only a couple of months. So finding mail which traveled by this emergency route is quite scarce. We can also find here some examples to Malta because there existed quite a volume of commercial ties between Istanbul and Malta. It usually went through British or French or Egyptian or even Italian steamships, which was used at each case. It's not clear unless there is a clear instruction on the letter itself. You can see that the first cover here does not bear any postage stamps, and that is because the sender did not prepay the postage. So the recipient in Malta had to pay 1 shilling and 6 pence to have to get the letter from the post office in Malta. The second case, the sender paid the proper amount to be taken to Malta. You can see a nice clear strike of the C barred postmark of Constantinople. But he was kind of unlucky because you can see up here it says missent to England. So this letter was taken by mistake to England instead of going to Malta, where the error was spotted and forwarded to Malta afterwards. And this resulted in a 10-day delay for the delivery of this letter. Another 2 examples of mail to Malta. A rather beautiful cover, the first one with 4 British stamps, 1 penny stamps. It is marked here, if you can see it, and in this insufficiently prepaid, which was put by the postal clerk there in the Postane building. Why did he put this? Because the sender should have paid, in this case, 5 pence and not just 4. So he put in sufficiently prepaid postmark here and made a note of 2D, 2 pence, to be paid by the recipient of the letter in Malta, because it was 1 penny the insufficiency and 1 penny penalty for the insufficiency. So a total of 2 pence that had to be paid. The second cover was correctly paid at 5 pence, so no amount of money to be paid by the recipient. Now, mails to other destinations other than Great Britain or Malta in this pre-General Postal Union period is quite hard to find. I have 3 examples here that I can show you. The first one goes to the United States at 6 pence postage. From this 6 pence, the 2 pence was for the transatlantic passage, that is from Europe, from Great Britain to the United States. The second one is marked by Alexandria in Egypt and is addressed to Bombay, quite unusual for the time destination. You can see here we have a very scarce use of the 10 pence Queen Victoria Brown stamp. We only know of 3 such letters in this period up to 1875. Finally, another example to a somewhat difficult destination is Gibraltar. Although we have a lot of examples from Gibraltar to Constantinople, the other way around is quite difficult. And I have managed to find this example, which paid 5 pence for the trip up to Malta, and the recipient had to pay another 4 pence for the trip from Malta to Gibraltar. Now, we go to the second period from 1875, when the General Post Office was created, until 1885. And why do I say 1885? Because in 1885, the higher values of the British stamps were surcharged in Turkish currency, in paras or piastres. So, after the creation of the General Postal Union, generally speaking, the postcards now cost just 1 penny, and the letter costs just 2.5 pence. The postcard rate can be shown here. We have 2 examples from Istanbul. The first one in February 1880, and the other one in August 1884. You can see that these are both 1 penny postcards, but they are of different types. These are the actual British postcards that were circulating, that were issued in mainland Great Britain, but they were also valid for use in their post offices in the Ottoman Empire. The letter rate, as I said, for up to half an ounce was 2.5 pence. The first is an incoming letter. It is addressed to a Russian monastery of St. Andrea, and it says Constantinople in Turkey. Of course, it was not in Constantinople in Turkey. It was actually in Mount Athos. So what happened? The British sender sent it to Constantinople. There it was, at the British Post Office, it was understood that it is not there, but it is in Mount Athos. So the postal clerk put this T tax mark to indicate that there was an amount of money to be paid by the recipient of this letter in Mount Athos. And why did he have to pay that? Because the sender properly paid 2.5 pence in England, but now it had to be readdressed to Mount Athos, to another place, so the recipient had to pay double the deficiency, 2.5 pence plus 2.5 pence, that is 5 pence to be paid in Mount Athos. The second one is a straightforward 2.5 pence rate from Istanbul to Great Britain in July 78. Interestingly, it was routed via Odessa, which is a quite scarce routing indication. The double rate was, of course, was paid at 5 pence, this time by 2 stamps of 2.5 penny. It was sent to the United States of America, the first one. The other one is a triple rate. It has 3 stamps of 2.5 penny. You can see that they are of blue color, as the color changed of this stamp changed in 1880. This bottom cover is rather delightful because it was sent by Lord Dufferin. He was at the time the ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, and he was later appointed as Viceroy of India. And it is addressed to His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, who later became King Edward VII. And there is a handwritten indication up here on the left referring to a gift to the Turkish bazaar. I'm not sure what exactly that means. I need to study the social history of the time to see what exactly happened at the time. Again, we have the General Postal Union, rates. We have two registered letters here. The first one to Manchester, which pays 4 pence as registration fee, with making use of this 4 pence green stamp. The other one is again a registered letter, but this is, you can see, on postal stationery registered envelopes, which were the same that were used by the British public in Great Britain. It was available for use in the British post offices in the Levant as well. This is a double rate, and by that time, when it was posted, the registration fee fell down from 4 pence to 2 pence. Now, the period from 1885 now, it's a different period because, as I said, on 1st of August 1885, the British Post Office surcharged stamps in Turkish currency. What does that practically mean? It means that they took the British stamps from the value of 2.5 pence and higher, and they printed them with the equivalent in Turkish currency. So this stamp here on this cover, you can see that it is a Great Britain 2.5 pence stamp, but it is overprinted 40 paras. 40 paras was the foreign basic rate. If you wanted to send a letter to abroad, all you had to do, and it weighed up to 20 grams, all you had to do is just affix this stamp and it would go. If it was registered, as is this one, you had to add extra postage, of course. So they surcharged stamps in Turkish currency, and from 1905 and later and onwards, they also surcharged stamps with the wording Levant. We will see some examples further on. Here we have 2 postcards at the period before the postcards were overprinted Levant. These are both 1 penny postcards, but of different types. The first one is earlier. It was addressed to Kazanlik in Bulgaria. The second one was addressed to Castleford in the UK. The first one is from 1889. The second one is from 1893. You can see here that both have barred obliterator or postmarks having the C on them, but the second one has a different type. It's the vertical type of postmark, which was used briefly for about a couple of years, and so it's more difficult to find than the horizontal one. Another 2 postcards here, making use of 1 penny. The second one, you can see, is posted in 1912, and so it has the Levant overprint on it. It's interesting because it was posted on a ship of the Romania Alexandria to Constanta line. So it was not accepted as valid payment by the Romanians. They marked it with a T to denote that tax had to be paid by the recipient in the United States of America. And he paid 2 cents when he got it in the United States. The top one is even more interesting because you can see that it pays a proper 1 penny to go from Constantinople to the Dardanelles. But it was routed through, you can see here the postmark, it says British Post Office, Constantinople, October 1. The 2nd of October, it was taken to the Galata Turkish Post Office, as you can see here in the postmark. And it reached the Turkish Post Office in Dardanelles a couple of days later. So what did they do in the Galata office? They put this tax mark to show that the recipient had to pay an amount as a penalty. Why was that? Because the Turkish Post did not recognize prepayment in stamps of a foreign nation for delivery within the Ottoman Empire. And this is quite understandable, isn't it? Well, here we have some letter rates at 40 paras, the top one. Addressed to the UK, you can see that it has a very special 40 para stamp, which is not the normal 2.5 penny, as I showed you before, but it is the half-penny vermilion. It is reported that these stamps were overprinted locally by Mr. Cobb, who was the Constantinople postmaster at the time. And as they say, perhaps he was running low of his stock of the normal 40 para stamps. Now, they were used for about a week in February 1893. Of course, my guess is, and most students believe, that this is a philatelically inspired issue to generate interest and revenues for the British Post Office. The cover on the bottom is at 80 paras, that is 40 paras for registration and 40 paras for the letter rate, and it is said it was sent by the Banque Impériale Ottoman. A couple of more taxed covers here. The one is addressed to Germany. The other one comes from the United States. It was found to be double rate cover, a double weight cover, so the addressee had to pay 5 pence, or as is indicated here, had written 2.5 piastres. Some multiple rates now. That is that there were second or third weight or fourth weight rate. The upper one is a triple rate registered letter. You can see that it is actually a postal stationery, an official post office envelope, which was overprinted 40 paras for use in the Ottoman Empire. The second one, paying 5 piastres in total, is a registered quadruple rate registered cover, 4 times the basic rate, that is. A much higher franking is here. We have 15 piastres in total for a letter that weighted up to 280 grams. It is addressed to Dresden, to the chief editor of the Dresden Journal. What is very interesting about this is that it has this big purple British stamp, Queen Victoria stamp, which is overprinted 12 piastres. It was the highest denomination of the Turkish currency, Queen Victoria stamps. And we have only ever seen 3 covers bearing genuine commercial uses of this stamp. Now, there was a rate change in October 1907, basically to make it cheaper for heavier covers to be sent abroad. The first 20 grams remained the same at 1 piastre, but the next weight steps became cheaper at 30 paras each. And here we have an example of lovely cover of Navigazione Generale Italiana addressed to Palermo. Now, we could go now to special services. The British Post Office there in Istanbul was equipped with everything, and it offered a variety of special services to its customers. One of these was this acknowledgement of receipt, or avis de réception in French. You can see the AR in oval postmark up here. What does this mean? It's the same as it is today. If the sender wanted to have a proof that the letter was delivered to the addressee, then for an extra 1 piastre, he could have a form attached to the envelope, which was signed and postmarked when the recipient got the letter, and it traveled back to be given to the sender. This one particularly is a nice example because it is addressed to an exotic destination, to Honolulu in Hawaii. Also, insurance of letters was possible as late as 1908. This from 1908 and afterwards it was possible. Before that date it was not possible to insure letters. This is the only complete cover we have from British Levant that shows this insurance service. We also know of a couple of other items, but they are only part of them, just the front of these covers. You can see that it pays a quite high amount of postage, about 32 piastres and 30 paras. That is because it had a very high value declared 8,750 francs, French francs, that equaled to 350 British pounds, quite a lot of money for the time. It's remarkable because it also shows the only recorded commercial example on cover that we have seen from this 24 piastres, the highest value issued during the King Edward VII's reign, and was surcharged 24 piastres for use in Turkish post office, in the British Post Office in Turkey. When I go to special stationery and special forms, postal stationery special forms, that is stationery that was sold at the British Post Office in the Levant offices to its customers. Postcards, again, different types from 1883. The first one issued in 1883. The second one was issued in 1892. This second one has a nice message about the 1892 plague that broke out in several areas of the Levant. 2 postcards, 1 penny postcards overprinted Levant for use in the Turkish offices, the British Post Offices in the Levant. The first one addressed to Austria, the second one to Sweden. Sometimes we can find postcards, postal stationery cards of other nations that were graciously accepted and were not surcharged or were not taxed by the British Post Office in Istanbul. The first is a Belgian postcard that was accepted at the British Post Office, and the second one is a special issue for the Austrian Post Office in Levant, which was again accepted normally by the British Post Office. Registration envelopes were also available in the British Post Office Constantinople. We have here 3 examples of different sizes. All of these are from the Queen Victoria period. The bottom one is not in that good condition, in such a good condition, but it's spectacular. It has 16 stamps of the 40 parents 1887 issue. The same here, various sizes, but from the King Edward VII and the King George V period envelopes addressed to various places. The upper left has this provisional registration envelope from Constantinople before it was supplied by the definitive issue. You can see side by side the provisional and the division and the definitive issue. The provisional is quite scarce because it was used for only a couple of months, probably even just 1 month. A special form that was printed and distributed by the British Post in Constantinople was this one. It is this specimen was used to the Galata Customs Office, so it has Turkish fiscals on them, requesting the handover to the bearer of a parcel that was sent on March 1909. And on reverse, it has a green Quai de Constantinople perforated label. Quite an unusual example, really. There was also a number of instructional hand stamps used in the office. We can see here the non-réclamé or not called for. It was bilingual, the duplicate here, and the paquebot, which was put on mail that was given to the post office from a ship's mail bag. That is, a ship's mailbox was cleared and was given to the post office in Constantinople to continue the trip up to the destination. So these covers were marked paquebot, the French for steamship. A couple of unusual destinations here for mail from British Levant. The first one practically was sent to East India, and practically went all over India before being returned back to Istanbul 8 months later. The second one addressed to St. Croix in Danish West Indies. Now it's actually in United States Virgin Islands. And one registered to cover from 1906 to New South Wales in Australia. The bottom is a postcard addressed to Tasmania. That concludes the Constantinople post office. And we will now devote just 5 minutes to the much smaller sub-post office of Istanbul, which was located in the Istanbul area. The main post office was in Galata. Okay, the sub-post office was in the Istanbul area. It was opened in April 1885. And we cannot find any mail from this sub-office between 25th of August 1896. It was closed due to anti-Armenian riots, and the 9th of February 1908 when it was reopened. It closed permanently on the 30th of September 1914, as was the main Constantinople office. This was the smallest British post office in the Ottoman Empire. So for the brief period between April, when it was open, and July 1885, we can find correspondence franked with ordinary British stamps. One of 3 covers known with British stamps for this short period is shown here, is addressed to Dakota in the United States, and it's franked at 2.5 pennies, which was the usual postal rate for a foreign letter. Again, I see here 2 postal stationery items. One is a postcard, an overprinted, and the other one is the 40 paras, the overprint 40 paras on the postal envelope. I saw them here mainly because they saw this S barred obliterator. Remember that Constantinople had the C barred obliterator. The Istanbul sub-post office had this distinctive S with a full stop postmark used on its mail. Some letter mail here at the First one is a registered single rate letter, making use of the elusive philatelically inspired 40 paras on half-penny vermilion stamp, which, as I said, was only used for about a week. The second one, showing two examples of the earlier 40 para stamp, is sent to the United States of America in 1887. We have now triple mail. Both of these letters are registered and they were triple rate. The first one in June 1887, you can see that it has both 80 paras and 40 para stamps. The 40 para stamps is probably the first day of use of this particular stamp, and as such is quite an important item. The bottom one is quite a lovely example, a beautiful registration envelope that you can see here. It has a red Express d'Orient label. Now, what is this? It was supposed to take the Express Orient train service. It's triple rate as well because it has both 40 paras and 80 paras stamps affixed on them. But research in the post office archives does not provide any evidence to support the theory that these labels, as it was assumed many years ago, paid any additional fee for the Orient Express service. Most probably these were put for instructional purposes so that the letter would take the next Orient Express service, and that their use is decorative. It makes the envelope look very much nicer. Having said that, these are very sought after by collectors because they are beautiful and because of their association with the Express d'Orient train service. A couple more of unusual examples. The first one pays only half a penny because it was printed matter, just like it was not sealed letter, so it traveled as a printed matter rate, reduced half penny. You can see also the Levant overprint on the stamp as it is after 1905. And the bottom one is a parcel tag. This parcel contained échantillons sans valeur, that is samples of no value. And these samples were also sent at a reduced rate, so to help the mercantile communities to come together and increase the trade volume between countries. So by definition, sample mail was sent at a much reduced rate than the normal letters. Another couple of letters here from the Istanbul sub-office. You can see that the registration label now reads British Post Office, Constantinople, Istanbul in brackets to distinguish it from the main Constantinople office. Lovely four colors here, stamps both overprinted Levant and in Turkish currency, addressed to Germany in 1913. Again, addressed in Germany is the bottom cover, which makes use of only Turkish currency stamps, and it is a quintuple registered cover. Finally, this concludes the presentation. Two unusual destinations from this small post office of Istanbul. The first one is in 1893 cover to Friedrichshain in Finland, and the second one is addressed to Sao Paulo in Brazil. So thank you very much for your attention. Teşekkür ederim. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. I hope you were hearing that.
Yes, I heard that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was very exciting for us, like we were following you with our text. It was really relieving that we have the correct dates also for our book. So I would like to turn you, if you have any questions to ask. Is there any question on YouTube? No, right.
Maybe I can. Hello, it's Murat. I just want to ask, where did you do this research? Which archive, or is it your private archive or another archive?
In
Sorry,
my
we
collection.
can't. Sorry, can you repeat again?
Yes, yes. Well, these letters are in my collection, but the research I have made was in the British Post Office archives in London, in Freeling House. Many, many years ago, there are various files that refer to the operation of all the British post offices that operated in the Ottoman Empire. So I found archives relating not only to Constantinople but also to Salonika, to Selanik, to Izmir, to Beirut. So the main research was made there in the post office archives in London.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's another question.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It's amazing to see how one building has multiple stories to tell. I was wondering two things, perhaps a bit interlinked as well. One would be, because I remember you said that there were certain countries that opened their postal offices, I believe after the capitulations. Perhaps it's going to be a very basic question in this sense. I was wondering, how did these countries open them, which ones, and how was, I mean, if you have any knowledge on it, how was the Ottoman Empire seeing them? What was its perception over it? And interlinked to this, I was wondering, at 19th century or very early 20th century, who was sending these posts? Like, are there common people, or are they, I don't know, person of ranks, and who receives them? Perhaps this is a third very small question, and finishing it. Are these postal offices are like firms? Because I remember you said they went to Brazil or Germany, and were Germans using the British post office as well? I would like to know. Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. Well, the first question, I think it was about the capitulations and how the Ottomans, how the Sublime Porte dealt with that. Well, really, basically, the French were the first to gain special privileges from the Sublime Porte. They were the first. That was what opened the Pandora's box, if I may say so. And after the French, other powerful nations started saying that, well, why do the French have it and don't we? So the Austrians claimed and had the same. The British did the same. After the British, there was the Italians did the same. The Russians did the same. Even the Greeks had the post office in Constantinople. The Sublime Porte had, of course, objections, but because they could not close them all of them, they could not also refuse to, let's say, to the British not to open a post office there when the Austrians or the French had already one. There is also an instance in 1908, now many years later, 1908, when the Italians also wanted to establish post office in various places in Turkey, and it is there are archives for this. It is well documented that the Turkish authorities did not allow that. And what did the Italians did? All they did was just send Italian warships outside the Turkish coasts, and that was enough for the Turkish authorities to grant allowance to allow the Italians to operate their post office. So it's not that the Turkish government really wanted all these offices operating in on their sovereign soil, but they had to let them do that because there was a very bad experience having allowed the French and all the other countries to open their post offices. They couldn't even refuse, in the end, the Italians to open one. Now, who was sending these letters? Most of these letters are, especially the early ones, are from the mercantile communities, our merchants from Constantinople. They could be Ottomans, they could be Greeks, Armenians, Jewish, and Franks, that is Italians or British or French who were staying and making a living in the Ottoman Empire. So we can find usually this mail to the major European countries, but from time to time we can find even more exotic destinations. Certainly, as we came to the close of the 19th century, most people started using, because it became cheaper to send postcards and letters when the times went by. Most ordinary people also had correspondence, and this is particularly true for postcards. We have a large volume of mail which is picture postcards. Was there any other questions that you have? Can't remember.
Perhaps, yeah, thank you so much for the answers as well. They were very enlightening. Maybe also, because I don't know about it at all, were these like post offices were working, like operating like firms? So when we say British post office, is it like, do they only operate for among British post offices, or like how were they working?
Yes,
Thank you so
what
much.
they did with, no problem. Well, they were open to the public in general. You didn't have to be British to go there to send your letter. And because of that, there was extreme competition between these foreign post offices. They tried to generate as much business volume as they could. So let's say if you were an Armenian or a French or an Italian who lived in, or a Greek who lived in Constantinople, you could go to any one of these post offices to post your letter to any destination. So it was practically the same thing, but because the main thing was if you want the destination, if you wanted to send a letter, let's say to France, then it would be better to send it through the French post office. It might save you half a day or so. But they were open and they accepted letters from everybody, and they wanted to generate business.
Thank you so much. Now you're here, I guess.
Thank you.
Like also from the newspapers of that era, we know that like almost like every week, the British Post Office, for example, was publishing like which day the ship is going to which city. So I think that was also affecting people to pick which post office to choose according to where they're sending the letter. There is another question.
Yes, Mr. Preserve, do you?
Hello?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can.
I think it's okay. Thank you for your great preservation. I'd like to ask that, actually I realized that beginning of the British Post Office in Istanbul, just almost the same time, end of the Crimean War. So that I wonder that did you see any specific relationships for the between the social effects of Crimean War in Istanbul and establish of the British Post Office?
I'm not sure if I understand correctly, but what the British, because of the Crimean War, established an army post office, okay, in the beginning, in 1854. This was from various newspapers of the time. When this army post office was closed, there the merchants, the commercial firms of the city made some pleas to the British government to allow people to use the service of the British Post. And that was why the British started the civilian post office, because they had these pleas from the commercial people of the city to open a British post office in Constantinople. I'm not sure I fully realize your question, but this was what started it all. They saw, the people there saw that the correspondence of the British soldiers serving during the Crimean War was very regular and very exact and very precise. And that's why they pressed for the making of a civilian post office when the army post office was closed.
Just the letters. Can you hear me now, Mr. Papadopoulos?
Yes, I can.
I was asking just that what we know about the telegraph lines. I mean, the British Post Office used the telegraph lines or something, or just the letters?
There was also a telegraph service. That's for sure, but I have not studied it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
There another question? No, I guess. There is no other question, so I think thank you so much for joining. And
Thank you so much.
for
Thank
coming.
you. I might even watch your next presentation in Turkish.
Yes, perfect. Perfect.
Okay. Keep up the
Thank
good
you
work.
so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.